Good evening, everyone. You are watching Dr. Politics and the Political Architect Show. Welcome back to your Friday evening habit. We are joined by some notable folks. As you know, we've got the Dean of Media and Politics and Political Biases on college campuses, Donald Irvine. Then we have Jason Trott, the Vice Chairman of the Anne Arundel County Republican Party. Anne Arundel
Hey,
County, the home of
An
the largest
election
shoreline
activist.
in the state of Maryland. They've got a larger shoreline than any other county in the great state of Maryland. So that means everyone owns a boat in Anne Arundel County, right, Jason?
yes, they do. Thank you, Dwight.
Then we have attorney at law, but not in the great state of Maryland, Mark Unkerfer, as well as communications guru and a friend of Alphonse D'Amato.
Very briefly.
And then we have Ryan Nydak, one of the original doctors, Albert down in Blacksburg, Virginia, studying engineering. Ryan, welcome. And then we have my old friend of 30 plus years, Marcus Alzona, in our mobile studio, getting the pulse of DCites on statehood for DC in Georgetown.
Not only that, he is in the infamous or famous or notorious social Safeway in Georgetown. So he is like the absolute epicenter of the Washington, D.C. swamp right now, reporting to us.
At least he's not at the parking garage at Union Station.
No.
All right, so let's go ahead and begin. But I want to say one thing. I think we keep saying this thing about Mark and the fact that he's not barred in Maryland. I think we should just have a chyron or something that runs across the screen. So we don't have to keep repeating it. Everybody can just see it.
Just make sure that people read it the right way, because what I don't want people to say, disbarred in Maryland. Yeah. That would not be a good look.
By the way, anyways, why is this thing stuck on Marcus' screen, by the way, on our stream? Just saying,
We're still going okay, though, right?
Yeah, we're going fine, but it's like stuck.
Okay.
It's got Marcus' face right now, even though we're doing, here, let me just see.
Dwight, do you have it pinned?
I don't have it pinned or anything. I don't have it pinned.
This is behind the scenes. We are seeing
live broadcasting.
The MDGOP Technology Committee at work.
Yeah.
We've got half the committee here.
Figuring out how to use Zoom, because
it's not Mark. See, that's how much you know. It's not a Zoom issue. It is a caster issue, I think, that's causing this.
Okay, fine.
But anyway, lead us off.
Let's go ahead and begin with the meat of the program. So today, as we all know, this is 9/11, the anniversary of 9/11. 19 years since the attack, and every year that goes by, at least for me, I just kind of think back to that day, and I just keep shaking my head because I remember where I was, but I think let's kind of go around the horn as such. Just kind of some feelings about this on this day, that this is one of the most horrible attacks on the United States ever. Who wants to go? Mark, go ahead. Why don't you start?
Well, I was going to say I was in Arlington then, and in a building with a lot of defense and also actually some intelligence community people, and I can just remember the shock. And I also can remember, as I look back now, this kind of scuttlebutt about a quote-unquote another plane was on its way, and that was one of the reasons we evacuated, as did lots of buildings, the building that we were in. So I don't know what people knew. I will also say, for many years, I lived in New York, maybe 3/4 to about a mile away in Brooklyn Heights, but across from where the World Trade Center is. And I will recall the first time going back to New York and not seeing those towers there, which had been a part of the landscape, and spending time with people who were, we knew there, but were in absolute shock as a result. And there was where we lived in Brooklyn, our roof, we had a roof deck that we all shared. And I knew from our former neighbors that some of the debris that had come from the World Trade Center had ended up landing on that. It was like all over, papers and what have you. And I tell you, it was a very real and wrenching experience.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Dwight.
Yeah, I was at work and it was kind of funny. We got it. The phone rang, and if you remember, at the same time, Pepco was having problems with manhole covers exploding in the DC area. And I remember somebody, basically, first call was a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. Then we got the call about the Pentagon, and somebody in my office goes, "Oh, it's probably just a manhole cover exploding. You know how bad. Just making fun of how horribly Pepco and how they had basic manhole covers that were blowing up in DC in the area back then." And then we realized, and then we found out our friend Barbara Olson. I think you know Barbara from Grover's meetings. She was on that flight.
That was actually one of the shocks. I worked with Barbara on government reform. Actually,
really?
Dave
Okay.
Bossy. Yeah, Dave Bossy.
Oh, no.
And the three of us all worked at the exact same time on the same committee, and it was a shock that the first name of a person who we knew had died was somebody I'd worked with, had been, had worked together.
I mean, I went to the roof of our building, and I could, first of all, people were yelling at, what the hell you do on the roof, no plane. I go, plane's not gonna hit our building, it's gonna. Anyways, but go on the roof, you can see the smoke from the Pentagon all the way from this far away. You can see the smoke coming up from the Pentagon, and it was just a heart-wrenching day because I used to go to New York City all the time. Like back when I was working for Don, every weekend I was in New York City on the Claudette Hale campaign. Claudette also, Mark. She ran against Major Owens, and every time I'd go up there, at least once a month, just for fun, I'd go up on top of the World Trade Center. It was just a lot of fun, we'd go up there, take some pictures with my old Pentax K1000 before digital cameras were a big thing. But it was very, an emotion. I don't think I've quite felt that kind of tragedy, so to speak, to that point. That would, it was one of those things where you'd never think it would happen to us in America again. It was like, it was kind of like Pearl Harbor, 1941, all over again. Except these were civilians in an airplane that terrorists hijacked and intentionally flew them into a building. Basically Japanese kamikazes, almost like, if they were flying into Honolulu office buildings, and it was, it's like and then every year around this time, it's like, well, you take a pause, and if you guys remember the second anniversary, the first anniversary of 9/11, skies were eerily blue, the exact same as it was on 9/11. It was just very eerie. And then the next day was Wednesday, and I used to go to Grover Norquist's ops meetings downtown. I called. I go, are they still doing it? Yeah, they did they definitely did the meeting. But I tell you, I took the metro down there, and getting out, you see Humvees on every other corner, and soldiers on the streets of DC. That's something I'd never seen before in my lifetime in DC or anywhere like seeing that heavy of a military presence in the city.
Now, Jason, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think me and Ryan are probably in the same boat here because I was 3 on that day, so I don't particularly remember it too much. But I did just send our newsletter out 20 minutes ago, and 9/11, I usually just try to live by and remind people that if today is the day where you should reach out to your loved ones and family and friends and let them know you love them and care about them, because you never know when it'll be the last.
Yeah, Marcus.
So I remember I was living in DC in DuPont Circle. We had just gotten married a couple months before, and I was working for a .com internet startup, before the first .com crash, and of course I wasn't up yet because our hours started like at 11 or 12, for the majority of the people, but all of a sudden I got a call from my wife, who's a school teacher, who of course was at school, and she's like, look what's going on, like check the television. I just remember being shocked by that, and then going up. We had a 400 square foot condo, but actually had a roof deck on the small building they were on there. And I went up there, and you could see the F-16s doing combat air patrol over the DC airspace. So I was like looking up with like a fighter or two constantly circling around just the area, and you could see the pillar of smoke coming up from the direction of the Pentagon. So I remember being sort of shocked by that, and how everyone cleared out of downtown DC pretty quickly. And then I lived down there, but you could go down and then you could see how like there's a bunch of traffic getting out, and then it was gone, and nothing was going on. And I feel like that, to echo what Dwight was sort of touching on, it was very much a generational moment, or a see pretty quickly, and a societal moment that where everyone in the U.S. sort of reoriented themselves about what their thinking was, and that it could, not only could it happen, it did happen, and now there was different thinking. Like in the following months, days, months, years, it affected the sort of the psyche of everyone, perhaps much like 2020, but it definitely was a sort of a generational changing moment.
All right, Ryan. So you're younger than Jason, right?
Yes, by a little bit. So I was 7 months old when 9/11 happened, so I don't really remember much at all. But I do want to touch on something, and it ties into the virtual background, and that myself and a lot of other people who were 7 months, 1 year, 2, 3 years old, were out today on Virginia Tech's campus putting out a flag for every victim of 9/11. And I should have remembered a number before the show, but it's something approximately just under 3,000 flags put out in the center of campus, and the school shares it on their page and whatnot. But it's just a good thing to see that among the younger generations that was either not alive in the freshman class this year, the first class of college students to not be alive on 9/11, which I guess is a significant thing. And then people who were too young to remember, still carrying on the mantra of never forget.
Yeah, that's excellent too. I mean, for me too, I was thinking as you guys are talking too, that how it just seemed very surreal. I was in my office, and my morning routine was to always watch CNBC in the morning, and so I'm watching CNBC while I'm doing stuff at my desk, and listening or whatever, and then you can hear the voices, the anchors on CNBC talking about what's going on. They weren't, the first tower, they weren't quite sure what was going on. They were trying to figure this out, and then as they're discussing this, you see the second plane, and you're like in total shock. So there was another guy in my office, an older guy, and we were just like, we went to the bigger TV to watch this together in our library, and we were just like, did this really happen? I mean, what is really going on here? We couldn't understand. We were trying to process it. That was very, very difficult. And I think, to Dwight, you're talking about, when you talk about Humvees or just all the things that are going on, Marcus, you too, just all the things that happened post 9/11. I mean, for a while there, we were in fear. We were also extremely probably tense, not knowing exactly what's going to happen. Would there be another attack even a year after? Were they going to use 9/11 as another date to continue another attack and things like that? It took us a while to kind of figure all of these things out and really sort out how we combat terror going forward. To have this come to our own soil, we've been fighting it overseas for a long time, but to have it come onto our own soil there and to take these civilian lives, was something. And as you said, Mark, Barbara Olson, someone that you knew, someone who was very well known in the conservative movement, to see her perish, die, be killed at such a young age, it was quite a shock to the system, I think, for a lot of us.
And she was also very key in the Bush recount efforts in 2000 as well, Barbara. She did a yeoman's effort there, organizing, the recount efforts in Florida. And we lost a great person in general, as well as a great fighter for the conservative cause that day.
Right. So we'll go ahead and move on here. This is move it very delicately as we move to the second part of 9/11, which is not 9/11 2001, but just to get some brief opinions about 9/11 2012. Was that the right year?
Yep, 2012.
And so that we had an attack on in Benghazi, right? And we lost some of our people there. This was diplomats at our consulate or embassy out there. Anybody want to talk about that? Obviously it was Dwight's favorite person involved.
Oh yeah, I mean, our president lied and our ambassador died. It's funny how the gall the man had after our ambassador died. He flies off to Las Vegas for a fundraiser for his re-election campaign. They covered up the Benghazi stuff until after the elections. They basically lied about it, said it was some movie that was made. Hillary Clinton wanted to have the guy arrested, and I think they actually did. I think I remember seeing some video where he was actually arrested by cops for some whatever, but
the claim was made that the reaction in Benghazi was to something that had happened in the United States, and which, as you mentioned, it was completely false.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is, it's what Don said, which was the fear, initially, and it shook 11 years to come true, but that the anniversary of 9/11 would be used for attack, among other things. But, that obviously is no coincidence that they chose that date to do the attack. I also think Dwight does bring up a point in that, like 9/11, 2001 changing our world forever, Benghazi did not have, obviously as dramatic of an effect, but it still did have an effect today. Arguably, it's the reason that Susan Rice is not the vice presidential candidate right now and Kamala Harris is. So, I mean, these are major events that, changed the course of United States history and world history.
I really would like to know what Joe Biden.
Go ahead, Dwight.
I said I really would like somebody to ask Joe Biden, where were you while our ambassador was being butchered by troglodytes from hell in Libya?
I mean, no one's going to ask him.
Of course
not.
But
I think it is just worth noting that both of these are events that have impacted the course of world history. And like Marcus said earlier about, arguably, 2020 is the next thing. Maybe it is. It's much less sudden, right? It's not like you had one day where it all happened at once, but we're going through a once in a generation. I guess it's not once in a generation anymore because we're talking about 3 times, but a monumental societal shift that's happening right now. So in a way, we're living through a similar thing again. And these are moments that don't happen often in history, and that's worth talking about.
Let me ask you this, Ryan, too. I mean, to your point about Susan Rice, do you think that, the Benghazi thing also hurt Hillary Clinton in her presidential run?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, maybe less so in 2016. Unfortunately, I don't think it was really held against her enough, but it certainly hurt her aspirations overall. She was, whether or not she would have stuck around as Secretary of State, who knows? But I'm sure her leaving the cabinet didn't have nothing to do with the fact that she was less popular after Benghazi. And then obviously that was the leverage Trump had over her. And it was talked about a little bit during the campaign. So I'm sure it hurt her. Frankly, I think she still could have won if she had gone to Michigan and Wisconsin. So I don't think that was the nail in the coffin.
She was too busy campaigning in Texas because she was of that
Arizona.
Yeah, also Texas. I think she was campaigning.
This might be a topic for a future show, but arguably the Trump campaign is less on their game with state targeting this time. But we can talk about that later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go ahead and continue moving on here. Another topic, which is just, I just kind of want to get an idea of what you're thinking about this, because it's a major news story. It's not necessarily a political news story, but it could be depending on how you're looking at it. But we have these massive wildfires going on in the West, really kind of unprecedented. I mean, California, Oregon, they're going all over the place. I mean, you see picture after picture of these glowing skies and things like that. And even we have AIM has as one of their people where she lives in Oregon, and she posted a picture on Telegram for the staff about. She says, "This is from my backyard. I can see this," and then the skies just kind of lit up. I mean, I guess in the political sense, I mean, you can argue. I mean, I guess what Nancy Pelosi said, Mother Earth is angry. That's kind of her thing about it. I mean, what this is part and parcel. I mean, we do go through these things, where we do have these wildfires, but this is pretty big in terms of the amount of acreage that has been destroyed, and we're seeing lots of towns really being destroyed here. I mean, any thoughts about this?
I think not to make this political, but I think this goes back to California's liberal policies of not cleaning the underbrush, and that's what's making these wildfires far worse than they really need to be. If you remember going back in time to Tom Dash was another one who basically advocated against cleaning the brush, having controlled fires and so on to prevent these larger killer fires, and basically
you put your finger on sort of the challenge there, which is that it is having controlled fires.
Yeah.
And so the challenge is whereas at some point in the past when these areas were not as inhabited, it was possible to have controlled fires. So now you build houses up in the hills and you have underbrush. So
kind of like people build houses right on the water, and a hurricane slams into them. And
I take your point, but it's harder to have the quote unquote controlled brush fires, and then as you're describing, what happens is this brush ends up accumulating over a period of time, and then the prospect is for that much more of a devastating fire going forward. But it's interesting. So listening to Nancy, that's not the conversation. It's the default set. What's wrong with everything in this world? You have a box, right? You've got two things, right? There's either A, racism, or B, climate change. And so this falls into the climate change box.
And it's all President Trump's fault too.
Well, in fairness, she can't really think about a logical response, because her bigger worry right now is that she'll get charged with misdemeanor violations of California's lockdown orders. But that
Ryan,
I'm sure that's a later topic.
Yeah, but here's something else.
Could I just? We talked about.
I got to
go
here.
Go ahead.
Can
I have a communicate, Dwight?
Yeah.
So, without question, the most lame response of anyone to something like this was Nancy Pelosi's response of, rather than just saying the appropriate thing of, I'm sorry, I thought it was private or whatever it is, to attack the owner of the salon, just made this whole story last days and days and days. And it was just, it was really malpractice.
Okay, I'm going to shock everyone here. I'm going to give Nancy a pass, because if she's going to go to a beauty parlor, she needs all the help she can get. It's not like she's called my friend Dr. Sloan, Dr. Sloan is a great plastic surgeon out there in California. Not too far, it's Southern California. I even sent her his business card to her speaker's office, because
I'll bet you did.
She could use his help,
Don, next topic, please.
Oh, Dwight.
I had to go there because it's like she is so petty. Maybe she was a little.
But Mark is right.
I don't think we need
Here's
to.
the thing. If you look at it from the media perspective, or from how stories go these days, is that this should have been a one-off story, and this story should have died a very quick death. But Nancy Pelosi, by her lame response, her created a story that lasted for days. I mean, even weeks. And it's still going on to a certain extent, because, she gave voice to the owner of that shop, right? And, there was a GoFundMe campaign. The last time I looked, a day or two ago, Erica Cayos had raised, this GoFundMe campaign was like $336,000. She's closing up her shop, and I don't know, I guess she's going to leave San Francisco or maybe leave California or whatever. But, maybe she should thank Nancy Pelosi for helping her get some money so she can go do something else, because I have no doubt that as a salon owner and being in a lockdown situation, she was probably in dire straits at that point anyway, financially.
Now, Pelosi, from a media perspective, probably should have just said nothing. Now, me personally, I probably would have had more respect for her if she just said, I'm Nancy Pelosi and I deserve a haircut and you don't, because that's what she was really thinking, right? I'm the haves and the have-nots. It's Animal Farm, where all animals are equal, but only some get to go in the house, right?
And
I mean,
also,
that's the idea here.
who's the
But
the person who got a haircut
Just
on a
think about
tarmac?
Nancy Pelosi and her expensive, fridge, refrigerator, and filled with the ice, all that expensive
well,
ice.
how dare it? It would be too difficult of a life to eat her $13 ice cream with gray hair. That's just not possible. But I digress.
No, but here's the thing. Okay, it's kind of
We
like,
should move on.
was it Bill Clinton that had the hair, or was it Hillary that had the haircut on the tarmac that delayed flights?
It was Bill. It was Bill.
That was Bill Clinton in L.A. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill Hillary.
Going back to the past.
The original point, but to the original point, I could see the difficulty it is with the wild. I mean, I guess we're talking about the wildfires,
right?
At least I think we were.
We were.
That
Going on a tangent.
you fight to fight the wildfires. First of all, I believe on the West Coast, there's a heat wave going on. But secondly, the way that that the I was going to say BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, in the Department of Interior,
The other
because I
BLM.
did
Not to be
I
confused.
did a project over a decade ago. I did a project for BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, but dealing with how to support the firefighting response in the West, because they have an infrastructure center, and what happens is there are some sort of like command infrastructure for fighting the fires, but the actual firefighting gets done by just calling up different firefighting companies across the West, and they sort of put the call out. They make these camps where different like fire brigades, fire engines go, and then they go out into the field and they chop up things to do controlled burns to try to fence in the fires. How do you do that given the current pandemic? I could see that being an additional huge problem in order to do that. Now, given you're outdoors, but you're still like camping with a bunch of other people effectively, or it's just weird. I'm not sure how they're handling it, because I was dealing with the networking end, but it certainly appears it would be a challenge just to be able to do that in the conditions of 2020.
Good point. I mean, Marcus, do you see these wildfires though? Is this a state problem, or is BLM, does the government own some of this land out there in these states anyway? And is this the federal government, the state government also having problems meshing together? Or is it?
It's that, the federal government I'm not going to use the acronym anymore. It's just, I keep saying the Bureau of Land Management and the Department of Interior owns like a huge amount, or the majority of I forgot the actual thing, but they are the largest property owner. The National Park Service is just a sliver of what the Bureau of Land Management actually owns. So I think most of these areas typically are on the Bureau of Land Management lands, or like federal lands, federal control lands. So I guess it falls under. I'm trying to remember all the motivations of it. It falls under their jurisdiction, and they have a response center in Boise, Idaho, to deal with the wildfires with coordinating between like 15 different agencies. But how do you do that in 2020, given all the additional interesting things of this year? And that could be a challenge. As far as the state response, I mean, I really I feel like California. I don't know any of the specifics of it. I wouldn't be surprised if there are certain policies that California has that exacerbates the situation.
Oh, it definitely is their policies. I mean, this has been like a number of years ago. I mean, if you remember back about 10 years ago, they had the big Yosemite fires, and California was also burning at that time. It was more Southern California at that point, but there was a John Stossel piece where he kind of exposed California's very, very liberal
Dwight,
policies.
I think there's a broader point that, not to go off too much of a tangent, but I think this is an interesting conversation, is this is a very common motif among environmental groups, and that they take up issues that when you actually draw it all out and look at all the nuances, it kind of is against what they should be for.
Yes.
They're actually for preserving the environment. Another great example I was just experiencing being in Southwest Virginia, where this is a very controversial issue, is pipelines, right? Environmental groups hate pipelines. But if you look at how do you actually transmit oil, transmit natural gas, a pipeline is much more environmentally friendly than putting it on a truck or putting it on a train, right? There's the initial building process, but then after that, it's, basically has no footprint really once you, other than obviously the use of the actual gas once it gets there. But the transmission has no footprint once the pipeline's actually built. But yet these environmental groups take this up as if it's the be all end all of environmental issues. It really doesn't make sense. It's the same thing with controlled burns. I think it was Sam Ledoux retweeted something about during the Bush administration, there was some big hubbub about how he was destroying the forests. Yeah. And really it was just a controlled burns, right? So they choose these high grounds to die on that really go against the cause they're supposedly fighting for. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a million other issues, but pipelines is a great example.
And
I think you go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I was say that I think you mentioned one of the key things that I think is more. It's not as much the state government, to some degree, as you would say the separate environmental groups that would essentially sue to say, well, you can't do this here. You can't have you can't do a controlled burn because it would affect this subspecies, or you can't have a fire and logging road, or you can't have a fire road cleared through because a lot of these traction lines there's just no roads at all, like period, or there's a small forest road. You can't have a forest and firefighting road, or a forest firefighting road there, because it could also be used for logging, and we don't want it's this weird give and take, and how much the federal bureaucracy is aligned with that, and or just really how it plays out in the courts, and how the federal government implements things. So, and these are not things that you can turn on a dime, like managing forests.
Yeah, but
you're talking about years and decades.
A wise man once said, "You want to save the earth, you pave it." Because something. If they would just clear cut those trees and put up some subdivisions and stuff like that, we wouldn't have any problems with any of this stuff, concrete.
All right, I think it's time to move on to the next topic.
You know what, Dwight?
Yeah.
You really didn't give us our little trigger warning. You should have said,
"Let me tell you."
Let me tell you, or not to be that guy, and then you would have been. So,
no, not really. A wise man once said, you want to save the earth, you got to pave it.
Doubling down. All right. Now we're going to get into more of the meat here. We're going to talk about President Trump here for a little while. So President Trump has created quite the media storm here with this interview that he did with Bob Woodward about coronavirus, COVID-19, and what he knew and what he believed and all of these types of things like this. So the media is all over him. The Democrats are all over him saying, "You've lied to the American people. How do you justify this?" Let's go. Let's have some discussion.
Yes, we're going to believe Bob Woodward, the epitome of impartiality. First of all, what I'd like to know, why does any Republican president after Richard Nixon get within 10 feet of Bob Woodward? He did this to George W. Bush. Now he's done it to President Trump. This guy is a pariah. Him and his partner in crime. Everyone knows my thoughts about these people, my theories on these people. There's a certain senator from Wisconsin that would back me up on this, but I'm not going to go there. But
I can answer your question.
And here's the other thing: is the president was trying to prevent a mass panic. You can't have the president running around with his head like a chicken without a head, saying, "Oh my God, COVID's coming, COVID's coming." That just run the. So he did the right thing by playing it down, frankly. And anyone who doesn't understand are just too damn stupid to understand that, frankly.
Well, Dwight, people what are your opinions on people being just as mad at Bob Woodward for holding on to this very important information for this long? in order to sell a book. If it was that important, wouldn't he have gotten it out as soon as he got
That's true.
as soon as he heard it from Trump himself?
Yeah, exactly. If he was if he really cared about that, but I may have to go there, but I'm not yet going there.
I think Mark wanted to answer your question,
Yes.
White.
So I was going to say, I mean, Bob Woodward is very adept at collecting sources by, if he was collecting a book about the six of us, he would talk to Don. And I don't know what's our weakest link here, but he would talk to, he would talk to one of us and, say blah, blah, blah. He would talk to Dwight. Let's go. He would talk to Dwight and get a little, Dwight said this, Dwight said that, what have you.
Dwight
And
called
then
me a
he'd get-
communist, and an agent.
He'd get on the phone with Marcus and feed a little of what Dwight back. And I heard this is what went on at the meeting, and this is what happened and what have you. And Marcus, I just want to get your side of the story, and understandably, Marcus is alarmed. Like, wait a second, that's not what happened, Dwight. That's completely wrong. Let me set you straight. And so then he's got an interview with Marcus and Dwight, and then the next domino is Ryan. And Ryan's hearing like, my God, he knows everything about the meeting, but he's got it completely wrong. And guess who goes on the record? Ryan. Now, the one guy who doesn't fall for this is Don Irvine, and you know what? Bob Woodward makes him look like the fall guy because he wouldn't be a source.
See, I wouldn't. First of all, Bob Woodward.
It's not Don. Am I right? Isn't this
That's very good. I like that.
I would not talk to Bob Woodward, but Marcus was there.
So we would finger you.
Yeah.
So the book would come out.
Yeah.
He would have sources from Jason, from Marcus, from Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not Don. Don, certainly me. I would, throw you under the bus.
Yeah, you'd sing like a canary.
But the way
Marcus
the story
would have the best storytelling, because when we were in Cleveland 4 years ago, I confronted his partner in crime, Howie Bernstein. If you remember that, Marcus, I said, I think you owe President Nixon and his family an apology. And
I don't think he does. Actually, I'll tell you something. You want to go back?
Mark,
want to go back and talk about
Nixon? This is a
Nixon?
man who did a phenomenal job. I mean, you blame. It's kind of like Governor Agnew. We blame him for one little mistake.
We had a show. We already established that 2 out of our 6 doctors weren't alive 20 years ago. Or actually, Jason was alive, but he had not matured to the point where he did now, right? But someday we should have a show about whether Richard Nixon was really a Republican.
Well, I mean, consider he did a couple of bad things.
That's not on our topic list, right?
Right.
Whether or not the Office of Price Control.
But back to Bob.
But look, I mean, the Wall Street Journal. There was one of the editorials today was, talked about this. And I mean, and they're not raw Trump, at all on the editorial board, and I think they're pretty well reasoned with how they kind of talk about the issues. But they said, look, Bernstein, Woodward didn't say anything that we didn't really already know, that hadn't already been said out before, that even the Democrats had also downplayed things early on as well. So that they said, you've got to, for voters of either side, whatever, is that, forget about all of this, just vote for the person based on their record and try to do this. It's because, there are plenty of liberals that are like, they have sopped this up like a sponge, and say, oh yeah, here's just another example of Trump. We now have him on. We have a recording of him lying about all of this, but they also pointed out, it says, to be realistic, which is something that I have complained about for months. Really, is just that all these Democrats talk about how Trump has mishandled the the COVID-19, the coronavirus, this whole thing. But tell me what Democrat faced with the same situation would have really been able to do any better.
Don, you bring up a more abstract political point that's tied into this, which is absolutely correct, in that a lot, especially among Trump's core base, and especially, the average, let's say the average voter in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, blue collar Trump voter, this is already priced in that whether it's the Atlantic story about things he allegedly said about the military, or the Bob Woodward story, or whatever one of the million daily outrage things is going to happen between now and November, people are already expecting it, and it's not really moving the needle because there's already such a magnitude of it out there. I mean, I was talking to my grandfather from Indiana today, and I can't repeat his exact. He's gotten a lot more opinionated about politics over the last year. But he said that blankhead Bob Woodward is writing a book about Trump. Can you believe it? I go, yeah. I mean, so is everyone else.
Yeah.
But like, it's not going to sway his opinion. All of these retired steel mill workers and current steel mill workers are still going to vote for Trump.
And Ryan, I mean, the way the left is operating, I mean, they've got more shoes to drop than Imelda Marcos had in her closet that she left behind in the Philippines that she couldn't take with her to Hawaii. That's how, if you notice, they have Russia. When that didn't work, they brought up, what did they bring up?
Impeachment.
Yeah, impeachment. Then they got more shoes than Imelda Marcos.
I think you've made me think. You identified something that I think we're missing here. That maybe a lost opportunity. We should have all together written a book about Trump to be released next month. I mean,
we could have. Yeah.
Come on, we should have done that.
I'm more excited about Bob Woodward's book about Montgomery County Republican politics that's coming out.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, Jason must have been a source.
Yes, he's the actual source.
He's deep.
Maybe you were the weakest. Were you the weakest link where he started with?
Didn't somebody sign a movie deal for that with Netflix?
Oh, that's a whole other topic.
Are we talking about that?
And Jason, did you just buy a yacht? Did you buy like a?
Me?
Yeah. Did you buy like a 70-foot cabin cruiser?
Yeah, we took it on the Trump boat parades this past weekend.
Yeah, that was from the advance from his Netflix deal.
Yeah.
But so anyway, okay, so let's talk about the next part of this. Something else that came up as throughout all this that I kind of want to get your opinion of or your feelings about. President Trump has been talking a lot more lately about a vaccine coming. He needs to do something, I think, and to a certain extent because of the political nature of what's going on here as we get closer and closer to Election Day. But I think Dr. Fauci had said, maybe by the end of the year. Trump is saying more like maybe October, November. I mean, is there a lot of difference between the dates that are set there? Is it important at this point? Does anybody think we're going to get one this year, and what the effect of it is going to be?
Well,
any thoughts?
I think the hope is there that we get something before the end of the year, but we know there is a cure coming. They're in the final phases, and I will be first in line to get that. I don't think there should be, like I know in Virginia, they're trying to mandate that everybody has to have the vaccine. I'm not for mandates. It should be, if you want to not get the vaccine, that's fine. But I think I would be first in line to get the vaccine when it comes out.
Dwight, you say there's a cure coming, right? And we're all like so certain of it, but influenza's been around since 1918, and the vaccine's only 50% effective every year, which is not necessarily a problem, right? The spread of the flu is relatively contained on a yearly basis, but it does beg the questions: are the goalposts going to be set reasonably here, like they are for something such as influenza, or are they going to be set in such a place where there's still? Yes, the spread is contained, but cases still exist. So we're still going to have asymptomatic people
could I suggest
still going to shut everything down, et cetera, et cetera.
Ryan, it will be depending on who the president is. If President Trump wins again, the goalposts...
I don't know if that's true, Dwight. Who your governor is more important than ever. Who your county executive is more important. Right. Who your unelected county health officer is more important than ever. Mark Elridge used as a cop-out this week that Travis Gales, our health officer or dictator-in-chief, he goes, I would love to allow live performances in Montgomery County, but Travis Gales said we're not allowed to. He's an at-will employee of yours. If you want to do it, do it. Like, that's a lame excuse.
Could I come back to John's original question, which was on the vaccine, and I wanted to kind of underscore what Ryan was saying, which is I think the focus on the vaccine is moving the goalposts, but it's also the wrong set of goalposts. And the more appropriate goalpost is the relative success or the improvement in success in treating actual COVID cases. We certainly saw some, astonishing, some worrisome numbers when it was ravaging through nursing homes in New York State. But since then, there's been some substantial improvements. And so, we look at the hospitalization rates and we look at the ICU rates, but that are declining relative to the number of cases. But what's fascinating is there's still, if you have a conversation about getting COVID, there is in fact still this sense that people have that the fatality rate is the way it was last March or April, and that's just not true. Now, jumping forward to the vaccine issue, as I think Ryan mentioned, vaccines, a quote unquote effective vaccine has to reduce by 50% the chance of getting the vaccine, of getting the illness. And so if 20% were going to get sick, the vaccine would be effective if it was only 10%, and that's the standard for flu vaccines. I know, Dwight, you've talked about you don't get the flu vaccine because
I get the flu
because you got the flu the year they took the vaccine, which is actually statistically not perfectly likely, perfectly normal. But my concern is that by creating this focus on the vaccine will be when we're all free, is misplaced.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, that's a good point, because I have felt that people have misunderstood what all of these things mean, that there's a belief that has been kind of perpetrated to me by the media, by the liberals and whatnot, that the vaccine will basically take you to zero.
Right. And that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen, especially with all the anti-vaxxers out there. I mean, we're not even at zero with chickenpox, and proof is if you get the vaccine, you're going to
but it's so misplaced also, because we're doing with vaccines, and I think rightfully so, in that we're saying not in an unsafe way, but let's push ahead and be a little bit more experimental and kind of go through the trials at a faster rate in order to get something out faster. But when you try to do the same thing with therapeutics of, we know this isn't dangerous to your health, it's not going to kill you, it's not going to have other negative side effects, we don't know how effective it is towards COVID, there's a lot of backlash. It seems, especially when it's like brought up by President Trump. I mean, with hydroxychloroquine, we had that issue. With remdesivir, there was less pushback, but people are still skeptical. I mean, these are all things that, how effective is it in treating COVID? We don't know, but they're pieces in getting us closer to completing the puzzle. And just because President Trump brought it up, all of a sudden shouldn't even be tried, when really it's all in the same vein of what we're doing with vaccines. Is we know it's not going to hurt you, so let's try it. And to Mark's point, we've gotten a hell of a lot better at treating COVID since March. I mean, we've learned that ventilators aren't the holy grail that we should be using. Being put on a ventilator was basically a death sentence.
And we have a surplus
we kind of moved away from that and using therapeutics. And as we refine and find therapeutics that are more and more effective, we're going to reach a point where even if, someone who's 80 years old and does have diabetes, or someone who's morbidly obese gets COVID, even for them, frankly, that yes, they're the most deadly group, but the fatality rate still is much lower than you'd think it would be, based on the media coverage. But it's going to be much less of a scary thing. And I think that's much more attainable, but also what we should focus on. And if you get COVID, it's not a big deal, is really the ultimate goalpost of this isn't a major problem anymore.
All right, let's move on as we kind of get towards the end of the show here. I wanted to talk about this relief bill. So, we've had this situation where, what was it, the Senate, the House Democrats had their HEROES Act, right? And then the Senate had, at what, 3.2 trillion or whatever, 3 trillion. And then the Republican Senate, they had a bill for about $1 trillion. Pelosi and company said, well, we'll compromise at around 2 or 2.2 trillion. That didn't go anywhere. We kind of went into a recess. We've come back. Mitch McConnell came back with been referred to as a skinny bill for about $500 billion. That failed through a procedural vote. Is anybody interested in getting a relief bill passed? I mean, who's taking more heat or blame on this, the Democrats or Republicans? And how much of this do we need now? I mean, is the economy in a situation that we need another relief bill, and to what extent? You know,
Okay, I'll
what's going on
say
here?
no. I know this. It make me seem like a cold-hearted person. Like, like one of the big things that Nancy Pelosi has talked about, the extra money people are getting for unemployment. But the fact is, if you're unemployed, you're still getting your state unemployment checks every week. You just because you're not getting $600 from the federal government doesn't mean you're not getting your $400 to $600, whatever unemployment is, every week you get. And
Well, state unemployment is pretty low.
Dwight, I think to take what you're saying a bit further, the solution is you can cut someone an extra check, but at the end of the day, letting them to return to their job is much better.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the states that have had particularly bad outbreaks versus the ones that haven't, or even the countries that have had bad versus not, there's really not a correlation between how much lockdown they got and how bad the outbreak was. I mean, it's all about, frankly, common sense and a lot of, so we'll leave that where that.
Yeah,
the opposite. One of the big differences between the House bill and the Senate bill is how state and local governments are treated. And the House Democrats have tried very hard to put in money to bail out the states.
Yeah.
And I've there's some staggering numbers out there for, say, New York. I think they're talking about a $30 billion deficit. But what's interesting is this debate is also, this is a phenomenon that's also happened in other states. And here in Maryland, while we have a significant shortfall, to his credit, Governor Hogan has taken steps to close that gap and made some cuts and made some adjustments. I can't say that we're, quote, out of the, we're only in the first quarter of what is the 2021 fiscal year, but has made adjustments to make things to bring things back into balance. It's not clear, but that's by cutting spending. So what's not clear is that in some of these states, as I think of, say, New York or California, there is this expectation that somehow Nancy is going to bail them out, or they're going to have to increase taxes. And I guess I have more faith in the response of Governor Hogan, who's taking changes, as opposed to a blank check coming from the House of essentially from the House of Representatives.
Yeah. And here's the thing: we don't need to be. The economy is coming back. We're at 8.2 unemployment right now. Things are getting better. I mean, honestly, these people, this is just a way to bail out poorly run cities like Philadelphia and New York City. New York City has not been run fiscally sound since Rudy Giuliani was mayor. You've got...
Actually, I'll give him credit. Bloomberg was not a bad mayor. Back when he was a Republican, off the rails on a number of issues, but as a mayor himself. But let me come back to one of Don's questions, I think, which was the political consequences of what if they don't reach a deal. And I tell me what you guys think.
Blame
Pelosi. We've already heard from you, Dwight. We know you think we don't need it, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. Jason, what do you think?
Well, I think one of the biggest thing going into this election this fall is the economy. And if we can't keep the economy afloat, how does that affect these senators in not so safe seats like Susan Collins in Maine and Joni Ernst in Iowa? How does this, I don't know how not getting a coronavirus relief bill would affect them if we can't keep the economy going. I would imagine it would hurt them.
And will they be blamed for the failure of the Senate to be able to even pass even a skinny bill?
Right.
But don't we even care
Marcus?
about deficits anymore?
Marcus?
Yeah. I'm not the particulars of the current bill. I don't have all the details of it. Although I do think it's one of those things, like, if for the earlier coronavirus relief packages, there was that negotiation. It was first a certain amount, and then I felt like everyone got something. But now the things that, from the limited things I've read about what Pelosi and the Democrats were trying to get into it, really was a complete disruption of our voting system, and like baking that into the coronavirus relief bill. So I can't see how that would be a bad choice to allow to go through, and just having a limited and targeted bill such as the Senate one would be, I think, the way to go. Is just who's going to blink first and who has the incentive to blink. Like if it depends on if you believe your own stuff, to use not use euphemisms. If you really believe that everyone out there can truly see what the other side is doing, then you have no incentive to blink. But if you have to try to get out that political message, like, oh yes, I don't know. It's hard to read the political calculus on this. I mean, just if House Republicans, or if Congress will go ahead and just add all these things in. I mean, giving people something versus corrupting the electoral system, I think, are two separate things. And I think that's a line that's going to be drawn in the sand there. And I'm not sure if either side is willing to blink on this, because either side, like all sides want, well, I would say our side wants to have free and fair elections. And the other side, I'm not sure if what their exact motivation is.
Also,
like their decision making for whether to support a bill or not.
And here's the whole thing is, I hate to say this, but the people that will be getting these free checks, the extra checks and all that, how many of them are likely going to be voting for President Trump anyways? A lot of them probably going to be,
That's like a Mitt Romney 47%.
No. We're not going there. Don,
right, look,
next
we're
question.
We're near the end of the show, but I want to ask, because we have Jason on this too, and several of us are involved in politics. I do want to do one more quick subject, and then we'll finish off with final thoughts, which is just really kind of where we are in the country, or even in the state, on mail-in balloting, mail-in voting. And just to I just want to one thing I want to throw out there is that I saw some report today that more Democrats are requesting mail-in ballots than Republicans. I don't remember what the numbers were. Does that matter? Is that effective? And what are we seeing in Maryland? What are we expecting in Maryland? Mark, looks like you were gonna.
Yeah, I was glad you asked that question. I know Jason may have more current numbers than I do, but yes, my understanding is that the requests are coming in very strongly. That said, it's an interesting conversation about mail-in ballots. Is the rejection rate for mail-in ballots in the primary was by a rather significant order, and this is not unique to Maryland or any particular state, but across the country, there were something like 500,000 that were rejected, which is well beyond what you have when you have in-person elections. So and that's not even taking into account this phenomena that, for example, in Maryland, I think the postmark is, correct me out, Jason, I think it's the day of or the day before the election, but it's right up to the election that you can do the postmark. So then you have this issue of it coming in late, and then the counting has to be completed by, there's essentially a drop dead date in December, so that the counting has to essentially stop then. So this is a very long-winded response to say, are you better off voting in person, or are you better off voting mail-in? Now, there's a lot of what Republicans are saying is we want to make sure that everybody votes, and encouraging them to request the mail-in ballots. But on the other hand, if the phenomena is that Republicans are more inclined to vote in person and use that option where it's available, and it certainly is in Maryland, and mail-in ballots are more likely to be found to be disallowed, and at a percentage that's high enough that it could actually impact on what the election is, that becomes kind of an interesting question. Now, I'm going to turn to Jason to say if I managed to say that without stepping over a couple of landmines. But I'm struggling on what the right recommendation is. Jason?
Yeah, I think people should make the decision that they think is best for themselves. I might get cut off here. My computer's at 1%, but 550,000 people have already requested ballots in Maryland, compared to 2018 when only 170,000 did it total. So we've already seen a boom in mail-in ballot requests, and most of them are coming from Democrats. If you're a Republican, we tend to vote on election day, no matter what's going on with the election. And if you're a Republican, there's going to be long lines on election day. I think. My plan right now is to get up first thing in the morning and go down to the high school or wherever our voting center is in Anne Arundel County and try to beat the line. But I do think it would be good for people to vote early. Yeah.
So I've got mine here. I have not opened it or filled it out yet, and I'm inclined to do the vote early. I don't like vote early, but I don't want to wait till election day.
A good middle ground is the drop box. That's what I'm recommending to people. Is I understand the skepticism towards getting the postal service involved in the transmission of your ballot, but if you're going to the drop box center and dropping it off yourself, that it's not quite as good as voting in person, but it's a nice happy medium where you still have a lot of control over the process.
There's one thing that I definitely would not recommend to people is if you're going to request a mail-in ballot, have it mailed to you. Do not get the email one. Because when you get the emailed one, you print it out on your own printer paper, fill out who you want, and then at the Board of Elections, they then translate your choices over to a real ballot that can go through the machine. And during the 2018 election, I watched the election judges screw up. I don't think it was on purpose, but they did screw up a couple. And if nobody was there to watch it, it wouldn't have been.
I would think it's on purpose.
So somebody.
Way,
Dwight may cut me off here for saying this, but it's at 8:00, and so only
we should
the
let Jason do his
hardcore.
final thought before his battery dies.
I was going to say, no, you got to hear this, Jason. So no, we're not going to send out a message that says, relax. You can print your ballot out on a computer.
No, actually,
What?
That would be wrong.
Yeah.
Jason's too young to know that story. Ask Dirk about it.
All right, so let's go ahead. And
Only
do
to
final
Democrats.
thoughts.
No. I'm sorry. That's a message that would be shared anyway.
Yeah. So since Jason's computer is 1% or less, let's do final thoughts. Any final thoughts, Jason?
Can I use the final thought to plug something in?
Sure, go for it.
Sure. It's this
All
one.
right, on September 29th, the Anne Arundel County Republican Central Committee is having a presidential debate watch party to watch Trump debate Biden. We're having it at the Glory Days in Edgewater. We're trying to raise money for it because since we haven't had a fundraiser all year. If you went to the executive committee meeting, it was where we had that back in the winter. Tickets are $45 for 45, and it comes with food and drink and everything.
And there we go.
And go to aagop.
That was almost perfect.
Yes. Talk about. So what was interesting? It was good that he told us that it was 1%, because otherwise we would have had this feeling like, oh shit, excuse me. Dirk just came into the office and gave him the hook.
But basically, if Jason, if you're listening to us, just shoot me an email. We'll add it to our calendar and we'll promote it. We'll be happily promote it, and you'll be getting a call about our event we're doing or watch. Well, not us, the club.
All right, Dwight. While you're talking, why don't you do final thoughts?
Let me collect my final thoughts because I got three
Okay.
that I can
All right.
do.
We'll go to Marcus.
There, something that we haven't talked about today, but over the last week or two, the president has deputized local and state law enforcement in Oregon and other places in order to deal with the Antifa BLM peaceful protest riots, where the local district attorney is unwilling to do anything. And that so far has proved relatively effective because the federal prosecutors were like, okay, you assaulted a federal officer, deputized one, but still. So that's been somewhat appearing to have helped calm the protests such that they're actually protests now. They're not riots, like, because the people who are doing the rioting and throwing the Molotov cocktails are being arrested and are staying in prison, not being released the next day. That's one hope. What if part of this is a lot of them are traveling to the DC area to start the the 50 days of protest leading up to the election, or whatever that they're supposed to camp out around the White House up until the election. So are we going to see an influx of people next week?
I don't know.
We'll see.
You could. Dwight, are you ready yet?
Yeah, I've actually got a couple things. One, first of all,
Surprise.
Play on Marcus.
It's a final thought, but it's really final
Surprise.
thought.
Marcus, you might
Final
remember
thoughts.
this, but back in 1982, we had a October snowstorm, and I think we got about 6 inches of snow in October in the DMV. And this would be a great year to have another 6 inches of snow to all those protesters who are going to be camping out in front of the White House. Come on, snow machines. But my actual final thoughts is, a couple things I want to just say is I have just finished President Nixon's book again. Well worth good read, and I am probably more convinced than ever before that basically if it was a different time, if he was like in today's times, he could have stuck it out and beaten that impeachment vote. That's my final thought.
Mark, you have to go next now.
No, you're wrong about that. I'm sorry.
Was it worse than-
My thought is a little bit more, how shall I say, prosaic. I want to talk about the ballot initiatives here in Montgomery County. It's a little confusing between the Initiative C and Initiative D, but if I could simplify it, one would increase number C, or the Initiative C, would increase the number of council members. So if you think what Montgomery County needs is more council members, then that's the one you want. But if what you want is simply to have more, more same number, but 9 separate districts, then that's the item going with D.
All right. I'll go next. And mine goes back to 9/11. I went to Mission Barbecue today with my wife. I had a free birthday sandwich deal, so I did that. And I have to say that I really love the place. We looked around. We were up in Germantown, and there are lots of police officers in the place. And we thought, wow, this is great. This is so well patronized by police officers. And then they had on the monitor, they had that iconic 9/11 photo with the firefighters and the flag and all that. But when we walked out, we saw why there were so many police officers. The Germantown station is actually about 6 blocks away. Is that today, all first responders get a free sandwich at Mission Barbecue. So I want to compliment and give my thumbs up, kudos to Mission Barbecue for reaching out and doing something for our first responders. They more than deserve it, and just patronize them when you can. Support that operation. It's great. Ryan?
All right, I guess I'll finish off. So there was a, 7th State, which is a local political blog that we've had interesting relationships with over the years. Apparently, I'm running some shadow backroom operation with a $15 donation, but that's not what this final thought's about. It's about, they dropped an article today about a very dishonest woman who's running for judge in Montgomery County. And you would think, what is the first qualification for a judge is to be honest. But, this woman, Marilyn Pierre, attended an event put on by Dwight and I in 2018 and said she was for law and order, and she was running because all the judges appointed by O'Malley were not rhinos,
Dinos.
but liberal, wishy-washy, and all this stuff, and we needed real judges. And we were skeptical. And but we didn't kick her out of our event or anything like that. And now she's running as a Bernie Sanders, Black Lives Matter radical. We need to defund the police, both of which are highly inappropriate, by the way, for someone that's running for judge, which calls into question why we have elections for judge in Maryland. But that's a whole broader constitutional question. But the moral of the story is vote for the sitting judges. In this year's cycle, they all happen to be appointed by Governor Hogan, with the exception of one who was appointed by our friend Governor Bob Ehrlich. They were all vetted, they were all screened, and they all are honest, and they do their job with honor and stay out of the public fray, stay out of politics, which is exactly what you want from a judge.
Excellent. All right. Dwight, you doing the sign off or what?
Yeah, sorry, I was just buying my tickets for Anne Arundel County's debate watch party. Everyone should go. And we'll have that house. I've also forwarded that over to Adam, so it should be up very soon. Just want to say, slow drivers in the left lane, get out of it, please. Bikers.
That's directed at Marcus because he's driving now.
Bikers who like to hog the running paths, get out of my way. And walkers who walk too slow and are walking little packs, and I gotta run through the grass. Which, by the way, real quick,
this is final.
There is a county ordinance. If you don't mow your lawn, you get fined by the county. And Mark Elric, can I go put a lawnmower in front of his house or the county council building? A lawnmower so they can go mow the lawns in the parks? Because I was over in Rock Creek, and the lawn is almost knee high there. So Mark Elric, get
Karen.
to it. Chop, chop.
Yeah, really, Karen. Time to sign off, Karen.
Yeah. So everyone, as we say goodbye, what's the famous